Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is our review of Bones and All. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're catching up on a few things that we've seen over the last bit while we were traveling and stuff. But yeah, here we're going to talk about a little film called Bones and All. Question for you, Stephen. Explain to me the causal link of transactions. You have this director makes a film with Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer. That is this little gay coming of age story. Armie Hammer goes on to become an actual cannibal. This director and Timothée Chalamet decide to make a film about cannibals. Is there anything there that
certainly when this movie was announced, that is immediately where my head went. Now, the boring answer is that this movie was adapted from a book and it was already in the works long before anything about Armie Hammer came to light. The much more fun answer is that Luca inspired Armie Hammer to have a cannibal fetish by talking about the fact that he was going to make this movie while they were on set together. During that phase when Armie was supposedly in love with Luca or whatever, he was going around. He had a few press releases after where he seemed like he was trying to make a big deal out of the production of that movie.
Gotcha.
But no, unfortunately, I think they are very unrelated to the point where Luca has actually been asked about this in interviews.
And he said, how can you not?
Yeah, he said, of course they're unrelated. And then he also said he would love to do a Call Me By Your Name 2 and have Armie Hammer reprise his role. So Luca does not cancel people who ought to be canceled. And I'm just going to choose to ignore that for the sake of this movie.
Maybe he just likes eating at the same restaurants that Armie Hammer does and he doesn't want to get disinvited.
That's true. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that was obviously my silly way to intro to us to this little film called Bones and All. Any serious comments before we get started, Stephen?
Whew. I don't know. All I'll say is I went into this movie not knowing anything except for the idea of cannibal romance, and I thought that it was interesting to know so little about it. Not even know how literal the idea of cannibal romance was going to be or not be in the movie.
I'm gonna be even more honest, Stephen. Until right before going to watch this film, it didn't even dawn on me that Bones and All had anything to do with cannibalism. I just saw a bunch of emaciated young couple-y people maybe getting into some
showing
trouble.
All their bones.
But no. In all seriousness, I kind of started to hear about it being a cannibal movie, as I got closer to seeing it. But this is a film that, I knew very, very little about other than a little bit of that. There wasn't even a whole lot of chatter that I was listening to. It was mostly a thing where, you were out and away, and I was just oh, what kind of stuff can I see over over Thanksgiving break? I'm all right, this is playing at Alamo, I'll see that. This is playing at Alamo, I'll see that. So I kind of went in kind of as blind as I can be generally, being somebody who does watch trailers and stuff like that. But yeah, this film was mostly a surprise to me.
Okay. Oh, so now I have the real right question here, which is similar to when we saw Raw in theaters, which is, what did you eat while you watched this movie, and how did you time your meal?
I got a burger. I was there early enough, and the theater was definitely empty enough. I saw it in theater 3, which is it's 2.5 rows basically.
Yeah.
And I got my burger and ate it real fast. But yeah, I didn't really know what to expect as far as how gory or whatever this film could get. But I was definitely not, even Raw didn't bother me that much, right? Most of the, one of the grossest things you see in Raw is somebody eating raw chicken out of a fridge late at night, right? I feel like most of the other stuff was actually surprisingly tame in a way, in that film. So I was kind of not expecting anything too gory in a way that might off-put me. But yeah, I didn't try to avoid my usual eatings, for this film.
Mm-hmm. I will say I abstained from eating, having nothing to do with the movie. I just happened to not eat during this one, but I was glad I chose not to.
Yeah, I also, the other thing that I did is not only did I not abstain from eating, but I almost got popcorn. My theater was mostly empty, but then right before the showing, it started filling up. And I always do the thing where I don't want to be the person who orders too much crap on my table, and then I share that table with somebody else, and then now there's this weird dance. So I only will get popcorn if I have my own table. So I didn't even get the popcorn.
I need to, even though this is the wrong review, I just need to tell you my story of being at the AMC for Glass Onion. Already told you that I confidently said someone was sitting in my seat only to realize I was in the wrong row. That happened. But the next thing that happened is, so I had booked multiple seats because it's AMC. I don't know what they're doing over there. I want a buffer for myself, Yeah. I thought Joanna might come, but I booked a third seat too, just to make sure she would have a buffer anyway.
Yeah.
Moments before the movie started, this young couple came in and sat in a seat that I knew was one of mine. And I had a moment of being like, am I going to tell them I know that's not their seat and then have to reveal that I booked 3 seats for myself? And I decided not to, and I just let them be there talking during the whole movie.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Did you tell them, hey, don't talk through that movie. You'll be able to watch it on Netflix in a month. All right. Well, ready to get started, Stephen?
Yep.
All right. We're going to take a listen to the trailer for Bones and All and then come back and give everyone a review.
So you can't spend the night?
Not all night.
So where'd you move here from anyway?
Eastern Shore. Try that.
Dad! You didn't. When the cops get here, you have to be good and gone.
I can't help you anymore. I know it's not your fault. You were born this way. You ate them. I believed you had to. I don't know why.
I smelled you. I didn't know I could do that.
I thought I was the only one. I don't want to hurt anybody.
Famous last words.
Are there lots of us?
I don't actually meet many others.
Why'd you offer to bring me along?
You seem nice.
I am nice.
I came looking for you. I smelled you.
You can smell me half a mile away. Can you do that?
Not that far.
I got rules. Never, ever eat an eater. I thought you might be hungry.
For hens?
No.
Who lives here? Is there someone dead up there? I'm not gonna be like that.
We don't have many options. Either you eat, you off yourself, or you lock yourself up in there.
We're dangerous.
You one of us?
Chicks teach me how to smell other eaters.
But we can hurt one another just as bad.
Go. It's too much.
We gotta do this. We have to do it.
You've been following me.
And we got unfinished business.
You don't think I'm a bad person?
All I think is that I love you.
All right, so that was the trailer for Bones and All. It is basically the story of a young woman who has compulsions to eat and consume human flesh, and the story of her as she, wanders off on her own and tries to figure out how to survive with the state of who she is. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Bones and All?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I really knew nothing about this movie. I mean, I knew Luca Guadagnino had directed it, but also I've only seen Call Me By Your Name from him. I don't have any kind of broader sense of his work, and I hadn't heard any buzz about the movie in any direction. Honestly, I don't know if I would have known that it existed if it weren't just playing at Alamo as one of the things that I felt like I should catch up on. And I'm a little surprised by this, as well as you might be, but I think I love this movie. this is really, in multiple ways, kind of my American Honey this year, where it is, you know.
I feel like you said that already at some point, like recently in the last few weeks.
No, that was Honey Boy.
Oh, Honey Boy,
After
yeah,
Sun
yeah.
was my Honey Boy. This is my American Honey. Because
Gotcha.
is the road trip movie through America that is about misfits and kind of like tattered people who are flawed and who are finding each other. There was something to it. I knew nothing about what this movie was going to do. I didn't know if there would be any cannibalism in the movie. Like, I truly didn't even know if cannibal romance was a real thing or was just like a description of like a craving that someone had at some point in the movie. And it manages to be so kind of lush in the filmmaking style, much like Call Me by Your Name. Like, I just think there are shots and emotional, tender moments that just worked so well on me. And I also found it very unpredictable. Like, mild spoilers for this movie. People do eat people in this movie on screen multiple times. Characters that you sympathize with eat people on screen multiple times. And there is a kind of fascination with this, like, this idea of being othered or like having a craving or thing that you are told is wrong and you kind of hate yourself for, but you can't stop. That I think it would be too reductive to just call this a metaphor, but it certainly brings up a lot of things. Like, queerness seems like a really big subtext of this. I don't think it's a coincidence that we hear like the Reagan administration talking in the background, and this is set in a time when being queer was kind of associated with the potential loss of life and, you know, diseases that people didn't understand yet, and they were blaming for it. Like, the idea of being a teenager and feeling like something about you is wrong and other people can sense it and is potentially dangerous, I just thought was such a interesting angle that I'm curious if it was in the source material or if it was just kind of added by the director after the fact. But in that context, not connecting the metaphor, because again, there is no perfect metaphor for it. It'd be very problematic if this were literally a metaphor for what it means to be othered as a teenager. I just found the emotions that it brings up so kind of lovely and beautiful. And the fact that it does that with uncompromising characters who do things that we as human beings see as definitely wrong or definitely not good. I just think there's like a challenging nature to it. And the way Timothée Chalamet and Taylor Russell kind of play that challenging nature with such like tenderness and empathy, I just found the combination very interesting. It was just a movie that surprised me in a lot of ways, and it was kind of beautiful and strange at the same time. And then there's the pack of side characters who I've hit or miss feelings about. I think Michael Stuhlbarg is fantastic in this movie. Like, I love the world building that is brought up here of this world of cannibals, and there are people out there who are cannibals, and what does it do to them being exiled? What do they do with this craving? What kind of person do they turn into? And he brings just so many interesting layers to that role. I just loved when he showed up. By contrast, I think Mark Rylance is getting a good amount of praise for this role because he knows how to he plays it where he's kind of a cipher. Like you could see him as being wholly good or wholly menacing, just depending on like a motion he does with his face. But for me, as I referenced to you before, he just sounded exactly like every Mark Rylance character I've heard in the last few years, where it's just this guy whose head is in the clouds. So I couldn't get over the fact that I felt like it was just Mark Rylance from Don't Look Up as a cannibal.
He was normal in Dunkirk.
Yeah, sure. You're right. That was quite a few years ago.
Oh.
Anyway, Mark Rylance didn't wholly work for me, but everything else about this movie I just thought was really, really beautiful and surprising. And it was a very small movie. You know, I don't have a ton of details to dive into and talk about. It just took me on an emotional journey, and I love how Luca is unafraid to be really romantic and then also really gory and just show all of it. And there's this kind of like weird visceral romanticism to what he does that just, I don't know, it captured something in me that I was not expecting when I watched it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll rip the Band-Aid off, not for fear of exposing blood that might send you into a frenzy and make you want to eat me. I'm still going to rip the Band-Aid off and say that I definitely didn't like this film as much as you did. There is a lot of stuff that I did enjoy in this film, though. I think, like, as you mentioned, the world building is really, really interesting. Like, I definitely like trying to learn about, you know, how do different people in this world deal with the compulsion, and the people who embrace it versus the people who try to like put it off and hide it, and sort of the way that like different people within the society also play into it, like the rules that people create for who they will or won't eat, or what lengths they will go to provide something that they could eat. That was all super, super interesting, and kind of seeing, slowly learning the backstory of this character through these tapes that have been left for her to figure out when were the first time things happened to her, when were the second time. When people meet, they always ask each other about their first time, and like all these things to like try to get to know each other, compare stories with each other, learn from other eaters in the world. Like just the fact that they refer to themselves as eaters is like an interesting concept. Like all that kind of stuff was exciting. I like that. I like the road trip nature of this world. The sort of putting two characters, one who embraces who they are and one who doesn't, is a very, very interesting thing to do. And all that kept me drawn into the story. You know, you've already kind of brought up the queer coding of a lot of stuff in this film. Something about that didn't quite work for me because it never existed in pure metaphor or literal making this subtext be text. And when it dipped into literal text, it was counter to the thing that we were watching on screen, where it was like the context of you making it literal breaks down in the who you were pairing off and like what you're asking them to do in the story.
Right.
And it made me go like, is this a metaphor or is this just literal? Like just the way that the characters behave and the decisions they made felt like, okay, so now you're talking like, you know, there are points where Timothée Chalamet, you know, may try to find an appropriate person to interact with, and like it is now just straight literal text. It's not subtext anymore. It's no longer a metaphor. It's just going for it. But then it's like, wait, but that doesn't make sense of like what you're asking. Like you're coding it as though this is supposed to be a metaphor, but you're making it literal, and then it's counter to who the character seems to be based on the actions they're taking everywhere. So it was just, there was something about that sort of, like it wasn't strafing the line or whatever. It was just flip-flopping back and forth between like, when is this going to be a metaphor for something, whether it's like, you know, the compulsions and the thinking that somebody is not right, or the thinking you're alone in the world and then suddenly straying off on your own and finding out that like there are so many people like you, that like there's a community of people to help support you in this thing that you are compelled to do. Like there's so much stuff that it like wants to play with, where I'm like, I almost wish it would be more metaphor or not at all, because it didn't seem like it knew how to straddle. That's the word I was looking for. Not strafe. It was strafing the line. I wanted it to straddle the line. And something about that just, it kept taking me out, because I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm like, wait, but that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And I kept flip-flopping myself as being in the movie and out of the movie, because I kept trying to see what the filmmakers seemed to be trying to do versus the story they were trying to tell. And it's like, as a metaphor, it's amazing that as soon as you run away from home, you find more people like you and you become more comfortable in your own skin. And like, I love that as a metaphor, but like, really, you've lived your entire life and never encountered another eater, but this film makes it seem like there's eaters. Fucking throw a rock and you'll hit an eater. Like it just, you know what I mean? Like it seemed like there was weird stuff that sort of was counter to what I expected from the story. And then there's things that like feel like not backing all the way back out. There's things to be metaphor. Like the first scene of violence that we see in this film is when, it involves people being in close proximity to each other and like smelling a finger, right? And in my head,
there's
in the
clearly
moment,
some homoeroticism in the way it depicts violence.
But that's not even the thing I was going to say. What I was going to say is, like, in that moment, the girl is like, try this one. It's called Copper Fury or something like that. And in my head, I'm like, copper, like the taste of blood. Like this. But then I was like, no, that's a color, not a scent. They're not scented nails. They're colored. Like, where it was like, it was trying to even play in the zone when it was just, what are we going to name this shade of nail polish? And it was like, first in the back of my head, I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, no, that's dumb. What am I even thinking? I kept being distracted by what the filmmaker was trying to do, and I couldn't fully sink into the story. And then by the end of it, like, I feel like, once again, a Band-Aid is just ripped off, and it's kind of like, and we're done with the story now. You know what I mean? And I felt like it didn't amount to anything learned from the character, just a journey experienced. And it's not that I need the character to learn anything over the course of this journey, but it's like, what she needs is for somebody to teach her how to be. And at the end, I feel like she doesn't get what she's searching for. She just has gone on a journey, and then I wonder what I just watched, like what it amounted to. And I get the beauty of, like, once again, like I've said this a lot on different reviews, where it's like, if I just take this as a fairy tale, it's beautiful, like, it's fine. But if I'm actually dissecting it, like one might dissect a body to consume the best parts of the meat, I'm left hungry still.
Yeah, no, I understand all of that. To me, and I know you aren't saying you needed it to be a perfect metaphor. You're saying the way it kind of felt like it flip-flopped between being very literal sometimes and then other times going against it. To me, the way it cast kind of a cloud over what it was trying to say was part of what I liked about it, because what I think the movie is more focusing not just on queer coding. Like, I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all story being told here, so much as the idea of the kind of, when you grow up, the feeling of having passions and also maybe hating yourself for your passions and trying to figure out, what do you do with this? You know, is there a perfect way to be, or are you always going to have some kind of regret seeped into it? There was something to that made it more powerful to me, because I couldn't just go like, oh, being a cannibal is like being queer, and that means her relationship with her dad is like there was nothing like that. And I enjoyed that, because what I felt like this was, I've probably used this metaphor for other movies that do not fit at all too. This is like a Where the Wild Things Are for like being like college aged and overrun with hormones and feeling like you don't belong and you are disgusting, but also doing actions and coming into your body. And it just has this, like, there's something about it that felt like it worked on an emotional and kind of psychological level in a way that was made better by the fact that I couldn't draw any neat lines as to, like, this is the one message it's saying. And, you know, you talk about there's someone who knows how to be and someone else who needs to be taught how to be. And you kind of want the movie to operate where at the end of the day, she learns how she should be, you know, how to carry this, like, closer to what Call Me By Your Name was. And in many respects, you know, the literal narrative of that movie is kind of what we're trying to map onto this movie. But it doesn't end that way, because I think what this movie is saying is shit is complicated, and in the process of figuring out who we were. Here for we all say queer people, but I think it broadens to anyone. In figuring out who we were, we probably left scars and we probably didn't do everything right. And how do we grapple with the fact that we were hurt and maybe we also hurt people in our orbit at the same time? And I think there was just something more beautiful about that to me, even though I also don't know 100% what it means. I should mention, I'm not trying to say that in the height of the AIDS crisis that it was wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying the feeling of complicated loathing in something that I imagine you would be going through in that time. It seems like it would all get tied together.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that we just played the trailer a second ago, and there's that line at the end of the trailer where she goes, "All I know is that I love you," and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this entire movie is like a cross-state drive, and your entire existence has been like, in a generous estimate, it's been like a week of time. I feel like so. I know that's a trope of all movies, like aliens invade and suddenly two characters are in love by the end. But like it seemed like there was a big leap to get to that point in time.
Yeah. Again, though, if I can call back to Call Me by Your Name, in these kind of movies, it is about like a very sudden and intense feeling, and that's clearly what she's going through.
I get it.
I hear it. I was surprised because I'd never seen a trailer until you played the audio, when we were recording this. Yeah. I was surprised that line made it into the trailer, because in the movie, that line is like very late in the movie, and I was tearing up while I listened to it. But this kind of splices it apart and drops it in different parts of the trailer in a way that surprised me.
One last joking question for you, Stephen. This is not even a complaint joke. It's just a joke. Remember in A Ghost Story, Rudy Mara like eats a pie in real time? Mm-hmm. Did you want that for Bones and All? Like just like straight, like just give us like, a pack of eaters just slowly consuming a body in real time.
Kinda. Yeah. I can see that. I can definitely see that. I did feel like the camera, it's funny because Luca Guadagnino is clearly painting some parallels between, and he's not the first to do it, Raw was also this, between feasting on meat and having sex, right? Like gore and sex and bodily fluids and all of it kind of wrapped up in one. Yeah. The movie, the camera lingers on entrails and people biting into things and the bloody aftermath and stuff so much more than I thought it was going to when I went into this movie. And it's kind of odd that when I was watching those scenes, I kind of felt the shame you would feel from porn or something. There was something weird where it felt like he really did tie those together.
My favorite subversion of that is that the first real prolonged eating scene is Mark Rylance just in his underwear. Yeah. I feel like they don't go for, like, no offense to Mark Rylance, but like they don't go for like fully sexualized violence in that moment, right? It's just like sad old man slowly eating a corpse.
I don't know, maybe we have different keywords.
Nice.
No, I know. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence either that he's in his underwear and it isn't. I don't know. There is that clash of what it's saying is kind of what made me keep getting pulled into this movie. Yeah. I think not literally Mark Rylance in his underwear, but there was something where there was no neat mapping to the story, and the question of menace and how do I even feel about these characters and how do they feel about themselves. It just seemed like a really powerful psychological excavation to me. And I don't totally know what it all means, but I was just, I was shockingly into it. The longer it went on, the more I was like, am I really going to love this movie? I feel like I'm not, I should, but I do.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question. I don't know if we should go into full-blown spoilers, but I'll try to hint around it.
Let's just go into spoilers.
Okay.
It seems easier than dancing around it.
Okay, cool. Then we'll do a small spoiler segment. So for now, before we get to spoilers, let's go ahead and give our recommendations for this. Stephen, if you're going to give it the same must-see, rec with the caveat, wait for rental, pass with the caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I am giving it a pleasantly surprised must-see. I think Timothée and Taylor both are just so excellent here, and I really think it captures something about being young and coming of age and coming into having a body and all the complicated feelings that go with that. And I found it very moving in this kind of abstract way where I didn't always know why I was tearing up, but I teared up like multiple times. And I think it is a beautiful experience that more people should have, because maybe some people will emotionally resonate that way too. And I don't think anything about cannibal road trip movie is going to bring you into that seat and expect that is the emotional response you're going to have. So I think this is complicated and uncompromising and also beautiful. And I had a really nice experience watching it.
Yeah. Well, apparently I wanted compromising and what was the other word you said? Whatever the opposite of... Dang it. I almost had it. It was going to be funny. But yeah, so I'm going to give this a wait for rental. It didn't work as well for me. It's doing a lot of stuff and I enjoy a number of bits and pieces of it. Mostly the fleshy bits.
Yeah.
The jowls and the little underarm flaps.
You don't like the bones?
Yeah, I don't like the bones. I like the all, but not the bones. But there's a lot of interesting concepts at play here, and a lot of it's easy to discuss some of the themes in this film. I just wish the themes were a little bit more cohesive with the raw narrative, and I didn't quite get enough to make me not spend too much time thinking about the themes as opposed to just purely feeling the emotions of the scenes. But I didn't dislike the film at all. I just think it didn't really stick with me the way that I would have hoped. But
it was no warm bodies.
Yeah, it was no warm bodies. But yeah, so that's it for the non-spoiler part of this review. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/spoilerwarning, Facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or Instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans at thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you are enjoying that. And that music is going to fade up. When that music fades out, hide all your raw fleshy bits, because we're going to bite them off. All right, we are back. This is the after part of our review of Bones and All, where we're going to be talking spoilers and all. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up first, which is the thing that sort of transitioned us here into spoiler territory, is the Michael Stuhlbarg has a buddy with him who is a non-eater eater, which is a person who is not actually an eater, does not contain the compulsion, but is apparently friends with an eater and he's like a poser, an eater poser who is trying to get in on the action and learning to eat and learning to smell other eaters, even though he is not an eater. And yeah, the idea of that class of person in the context of this world was super, super interesting. I don't know what it means for all the metaphors that are going around in this world.
I don't think it does. That's one of those places where I think it just it refuses to be just the metaphor, basically. It's trying to make it more complicated.
But yeah, I really thought that was a compelling thing, just the idea of I mean, it's been a little while since I've seen the film, a few weeks now, but I feel like the backstory for that character was that he stumbled into a field and saw Michael Stuhlbarg eating somebody and was like, that seems cool. And instead of running and cowering, he was like, can you break me off a piece of that?
Yeah. Or I even though I think it does not track with the metaphor anymore, I definitely got a kind of he is a voyeur, or he got some kind of sexual, let me watch, let me be there. He's a cuck. He's a meat cuck. But then he decides he wants to join in. I also, that is an example of some of the kind of world building the movie is doing around the edges where I'm like, wow, there is a whole lore here that I could go down if I wanted to.
But that's the thing is, like, I mean, I feel more comfortable talking about it if I remove the metaphors of this film completely. Yeah. But the idea of a person who, like, if you're born an eater, there is an actual compulsion. You know, different characters talk about the first time they ate, they were in a situation, they blacked out, and when they came to, they were covered in blood, right? It's like a literal thing that you cannot control. Your body takes over, your instincts take over, and you consume it. Even the ones who have resigned themselves to the life of being an eater still are averse to it in some way. That's why they create codes like, you know, never eating other eaters, or, you know, like Mark Rylance's character. You can smell somebody who's close to death, and if you smell somebody who's about to die, you will wait till they die naturally and then consume them right after they've died, as opposed to just like it's not a vampire situation where you're just like swooping down from the darkness and killing people and then eating them, right? You know, in between Mark Rylance and Taylor Russell, like there is Timothée Chalamet's character, who is sort of like, look, I'm going to kill some people, but like, I'm just going to kill like assholes or people nobody loves. Like, I'm not going to just go around murdering people for fun, but like, you know, if you're drunk and, you know, maybe you deserve to die. Like, you know, so I was really invested in seeing all that kind of stuff. But the idea of a person who has zero compulsion, but is just so fucking either turned on or intrigued by the idea of, you know, like, you know, maybe an Armie Hammer type, who is just like, you know, I'm gonna eat me some of that flesh. that is very. It seems more like, obviously the film portrays it as like we feel sympathetic towards the people with the compulsion to eat. You know, it's not their choice. They didn't mean to in a lot of the cases. But a person who just like is like, yeah, I want to get on there and do this thing that's super fucked up. It's gonna be crazy. There was something about that really, really intrigued me, and like I wanted to know more about different kinds of people in the society, and whether, you know, like obviously we have just those kind of four groups: the people who can't control it, the people who can and sort of maybe only pick bad people, the people who can control it, can control when they do it, and only pick people who are dying anyways, and then the posers who are just fucking twisted. I wanted to see even more groups of people, and I'm really interested in, like, you know, not fanfic in this world, but like other stories.
The taxonomy of cannibals. I also would have happily seen them continue to meet other eaters in this world just to get more of a sense of that. I think though that like taxonomy is kind of part of the complicated morals of the movie, because I don't know about you, but for me, when the character Dale, who is the guy who was not born an eater, but he has decided to become one anyway, when it's first revealed who he is and what he does, I, much like the main character, recoiled in a like, oh, well, he is evil then for doing that. Like, I've already invented a morality in my mind where, because I'm giving him because he doesn't have this mystical thing that forces him to do it, I'm like, oh, well, he's a murderer, he is absolutely wicked. But then it's like, you get in the details, well, how often do they actually need to eat? You know, like, did her mother do it right in that morality lens by locking herself away and not allowing herself to eat anyone? You know, the movie it's toying with you, and it's toying with you on a moral question where the answer should be clear to us, but it's making it troubling because we empathize with everyone. And then I think it's like, there's something about how, because it's playing with morality where we can't fully buy into the moral code of the universe, it makes it feel like you are empathizing with people who you do want to relate to. I don't know how it works, but there's something about it where, like, the fact that I think we can all agree murdering and eating people is wrong. Yeah. And yet the movie makes us feel pangs for them and want them to live fulfilling lives and even be able to murder and eat assholes occasionally. Like, I don't know. There's something about that gradient that I think the movie is playing a lot with your moral compass in a way that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Now I'm going to ask you a few nitpicky details or more thought experiments.
Well, first I want to call out that Dale, the eater voyeur guy, is David Gordon Green, the director of many movies, most recently the Halloween reboots, but also things that are more in the visual style of something like Luca, and it was interesting to see him crop up there.
So he was just literally a person who enjoys gore and...
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, give me some of that.
Nice. Yeah, so here's my question for you. So the one thing, we talked about the good things about the world building, like these different types of people with their various sets of morals. All right, putting all that on the side, you have a body in front of you, died of natural causes. Maybe you were just hitchhiking along the road and then somebody hit a body and then ran away. No harm, no foul. Don't want to let this just go to the birds. Might as well eat this now, right? What are the rules of cannibalism from the standpoint of what feeds the compulsion, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm not going to eat bones and all in that moment, how long can I be satiated by that meat if I just, wrap some in a little handkerchief and put it in my pocket and save some for later when I need a little nibble, right? Can I cook human flesh and eat it? Like if I just prepared, like if Hawthorne was here and could like cook me the best thigh that I've ever had, mm-hmm. would that still get rid of my craving, or does it have to be like bloody raw flesh that just happened? Because I never understood why folks weren't like taking to-go orders, Right.
No, I get it. I think in this world it has to be bloody raw flesh that just happened, and there's something about the ritual of feeding directly off of the body that is like necessary to it. They're not the way the film shoots cannibalism in all cases except for maybe at the end where she is eating Timmy, bones and all. There, she seems very kind of cogent and like in control the whole time and doing this as a conscious act of love for him. I mean,
it seems like there's a transition that slowly happens where it starts off as that, but then the bloodlust takes over and it's like, she seems to be going from in control to not in control.
Because every other case, that transition is very clear. And it's interesting because it isn't, the movie doesn't paint it as bloodlust in the way that we're used to seeing. Like you were joking about like, if I would smell blood, right, and if that would be a problem. I forget what you were doing that would cause that to happen.
Ripping off a Band-Aid.
Rip off a Band-Aid, yeah. This movie doesn't have that language much at all. Like they talk about the idea of if you go too long without feeding, you don't know what you're going to do, right? You might snap. But for the most part, other than her as a teenager who isn't in control of it yet, no one here is just like snapping and suddenly in a 28 days later frenzy or anything like that. Like it's more they know they have this thing to do. They get ready for the ritual of it, and then they transition into creatures that have to eat. Not totally ravenously, just I don't. It's interesting. The visual language of how they feast is fascinating, and honestly, very hard to separate from the metaphor of sex, because it is another one of those things where it'd be one thing if they were like, I go crazy when I smell blood, like a werewolf or something, and I just turn into something else and I become a danger to everyone. But this is more like I have this thing that supposedly I could deprive myself of forever. I'm not sure how exactly. It might require a lot of effort and locking myself away from the world, but I could deprive myself of it forever. And every time I eat, it isn't because I was going to die 5 minutes later if I didn't eat. It's a thing that I know I need to be entirely who I am, and we need to find some accommodation for how that fits in my life. You know, like that to me is the part of it that is most sexual orientation in nature, And I just thought that was interesting.
And that's the thing, because like, if you think about it, if you wait until you black out, then you're more likely to go bones and all, right? If you're, having some Bob jerky like 3 times a day as part of your square meals, does that craving just never happen? Does the craving only happen when you deprive it? Like that's the thing that I'm kind of getting at, because it feels like, I might just break a rule. I know we're in spoiler territory for this film, but there is another cannibalist film that has come out in recent years. I think it was called Fresh. I feel like it's on Hulu now. It's got a Bucky in it.
Sebastian Stan.
Yeah. And that involves cannibalism with a plan, right? But it's not about compulsion. It's about it's more on the menu side of things, where it's like, oh no, just human flesh is great to eat. Like, and there is a way to like there's companies right now that give you toilet paper that's made from bamboo, so you don't have to kill the whole tree just to make your toilet paper. That film involves a similar idea, which is don't kill the whole tree. You can slowly eat something and have it not be dead, right? I just feel like this film is not even interested in that idea of like, how do I actually handle the cravings as opposed to just indulge everyone? Because, I mean, think about it. Just the sheer fact that you have to do the work to kill somebody every time you want to eat. Like, I know that this film is essentially a period piece in the year of Walkman.
Right.
This would be a much different film if it was like a modern day 2022 DNA and shit like that was a thing. This film would play out way differently. But the fact that it's still dangerous to go out and try to kill people if that's the class of eater that you are. But it just seems like that maybe there's better ways, maybe you gotta use the whole beast. You take somebody out, right? If you're not if you're bones and alling it, then good, you bones and all it. But I mean, if you're chewing on some flabby arm meat and then
throw some fava beans and Chianti in there.
But you know what I mean? At least find a pack of eaters where it's like, oh, you like brains? Cool, you got the brains. Oh, you like thigh meat? Okay, you got thigh meat. You like belly? Okay, go for the belly. Right? Like it just seems like it's better to plan out as opposed to let yourself succumb to the sudden thing and then just leave bodies around. I mean, the film implies that they're always cleaning up the scene, but I refuse to believe that they can clean that well.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure how often they have to feed. Right. The film is kind of ambiguous about that, and it seems like some people indulge to the point where it is way more often than others. Like the length of Mark Rylance's braid rope isn't that long, all things considering. Yeah. Considering how old he is and how much life he's lived.
Maybe it takes him a long time to make the rope, and then he's so concentrated on the rope that he doesn't even have time to eat. Yeah, when he first starts unwrapping the rope, my assumption was just there's meat in there, right? Like he's like, let me put some more meat in my purse. but then it's like hair, and I'm like, oh, that's way worse than what I thought it was.
Yeah, so first of all, to wrap up the conversation we were just having, I agree with you, and this gets back to the not quite literal and not quite metaphorical, right, aspect of the movie. Because if we are truly seeing this as just a pragmatic, how do you live with this cannibalistic desire, you're right, there are all sorts of things that you could imagine a person building on top of it to make it better. Like, we work in groups, we eat to go, we satisfy cravings in micro doses, rather than all at once. The movie is definitely not concerned with truly solving that problem.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that is, for all we know, the just be a person path that they're going down in the end before Mark Rylance comes back is something like that, where they are being purely ethical now, and they found some way to satisfy the craving that isn't, who knows what it is. But I think at that point, and in a bunch of these points, the movie wants to go into metaphor of give yourself over to lust and pleasure and joy, that's kind of what the movie wants to do. Even if morally speaking, in the universe of the movie, that being glorified is hard to square.
Yeah.
You know. Now, what I was going to say on the Mark Rylance train is he makes a point early on of saying he always does it like this. Like, he only eats people who he found, who were already dying.
Yeah.
At the end, and my one real criticism of the movie, which otherwise I think is really tight and doesn't overtell too much, you know, it mostly shows without telling, is at the very end when Timmy, after we have seen the braid, clearly seen what the braid represents, you know, Timmy says, "Oh my God, he killed Kayla," or whatever his sister's name was. He didn't need to say that out loud. I'm just going to say right now that is like the movie not trusting us with its own visual language.
Well, I'll tell you one the opposite direction. That could be any blonde girl. Just kidding.
Yep. Anyway, what I was going to say, he killed her. He clearly didn't just find her dead and then eat her. So do we think he has been deluded and lying this whole time, or do we think something awoke in him?
No, he states his wills, right? He was saying that like if you would have stayed with me, it would have been fine, but you know too much about me and my habits. You can connect me to, like, it was more of a like, you know, deleting all the witnesses, right? Like she, if you ever get caught because you don't follow my rules, they could use you to find me. Like it was that sort of thing. Like it's she knew too much, and he was trying to literally eat all the evidence. Is the way I sort of interpreted it. And he was breaking with formalities for the purposes of, like, if you can't be mine, you're going to be nobody's. And it didn't seem overtly sexual, but mostly like, hey, I want a little colony. I want a little pupil to continue my braided rope once I'm gone. And, you know, maybe he wants to be consumed by another eater when he dies, and maybe he's close to death or something like that. You know, like I can extrapolate all over the place, but I think he knew he was breaking protocol coming after them, which is why he didn't lustfully just attack her, right? He was like telling her, like, you gotta know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I'm not saying why did he attack them. I'm saying he killed Timothée Chalamet's sister and presumably ate her along the way in a way that would also violate his rules. But I don't think she is a witness to the fact that they're cannibals, and certainly not that he, by extension, is a cannibal, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't know what she knows, but I think that was mostly a punishing. He probably saw Timothy as the reason why she wouldn't stay. Like, if only he was gone and his sister was gone, then maybe, you know, like, it seemed like purely a fucked up thing, like, was purposely trying to be evil as opposed to, like, because why would he even be around her? Or maybe when he was driving around following them, he wasn't looking where he was driving and he hit her. And then he was like, can't let this go to waste.
Yeah. My final thought on him is, and I can't explain this, so don't ask me for follow-ups. He reminds me of Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't remember the lore of Yondu at all, but I feel like traveling with him is like traveling with Yondu.
Nice. Cool. Any last thoughts, Stephen?
That's all I got.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will see you next time.
Bye.